United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed concern about the escalation in the Middle East and warns that the region is on the brink of an abyss. In Venezuela, the delegation of the Colombian government in talks with the National Liberation Army (ELN) confirmed the beginning of an extraordinary round of dialogue. And in the United States, the criminal trial against former President Donald Trump began Monday in New York. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed concern about the escalation in the Middle East and warns that the region is on the brink of an abyss. The head of the multilateral organization spoke at the Security Council convened by Israel after the Iranian Operation True Promise. There he assured that the peoples of the region are facing the real danger of a devastating large-scale conflict. Guterres called on the parties to de-escalate the situation immediately. The effectiveness of the United Nations has been put to the test by Israel and the United States in the midst of the genocidal operation they are carrying out in Gaza, allowing the murder of more than 15,000 Palestinian children cast up on the whole United Nations system. In the meantime, Vasily Nevencia, representative of Russia in the United Nations, accuses both the organization for its lack of character and the West for its hypocrisy of being responsible for the escalation of war in the Middle East. The diplomat described the session urgently convened on Sunday as a parade of hypocrisy and double standards. Nevencia referred to the meeting on April 2nd, promoted by Russia, where they were to discuss the terrorist attacks on an Iranian diplomatic headquarters in Damascus. The authorities recalled the United States, France and the United Kingdom that they refused to reaffirm the basic principles of diplomatic law on the inviolability of delegations when Israel assassinated Iranian officials in the Syrian capital.
The United States, France, the United Kingdom, all refused to confirm that the basic principles of international law on the inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises stipulated in the Vienna Conventions should be applied equally and identically to all states, and we see the result of all this today. You know very well that an attack against a diplomatic representation, according to the international law, is a casus belli, and what would have happened if Western diplomatic missions had been attacked? Because you would have taken measures, and you would have explained us with good arguments the reason of your answer. Because everything that has to do with Western representation and Western citizenship is something sacred that must be defended, but when it comes to other states, their right, including the right to legitimate defense and the right to defend their citizenship, this is another matter. It is different, it is not the same, as you say.
The Supreme National Security Council of Iran reiterated on Monday that any aggression by the Zionist occupier will be met with a strategy 10 times greater than that of April 14th. The Iranian entity affirmed that the Operation True Promise is a legal and legitimate action protected by the United Nations Charter. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps also pointed out that it informed several countries and governments, including the United States, well in advance. This version was confirmed by officials from the Pentagon and the Turkish Foreign Ministry, who acted as mediators between Washington and Tehran. Reiterating that the operation was successful, Iran reaffirmed its readiness for any scenario that might arise. The Caribbean community, CARICOM, insisted Monday on avoiding destabilization in the Middle East and protecting world peace in the face of worsening conflicts with Iran's response to Israel's bombing of the consulate in Syria. A communique from the Council of Foreign Relations of the bloc regretted the latest events in that area, called for urgent action by the international community, and emphasized the consequences of military incursions for the security of the entire world. CARICOM demanded the immediate cessation of hostilities between Iran and Israel and requested both parties to refrain from taking further steps to exacerbate tensions and to adhere to the dialogue to solve the differences. It also called to work for the end of the conflict and bring humanitarian assistance to the victims. Israeli occupation troops fired hundreds of Palestinians moving from Rafah north of Gaza after spreading rumors about the opening of the coastal road to Al-Rashed. The occupation forces fired on women, children and elderly people moving in that direction. The Zionists allowed them to advance to one of their checkpoints where they opened fire, forcing them to retreat. Many claimed in the media and social networks that they are tired and humiliated by the situation in Rafah and that they are threatened daily with a large-scale military operation. In Palestine, more than 700,000 civilians face a health crisis due to environmental pollution that has reached unprecedented levels in the northern Gaza Strip. The government media office in Gaza indicated that the health and environmental crisis is generated by the waste and rubble left behind by the constant Israeli bombardments. It also warned that the bodies of thousands of martyrs decomposing under the rubble constitute a serious health and environmental hazard. The entity indicated that these damages are also leading to the spread of infectious diseases in thousands of citizens. The World Health Organization condemned through its ex-social network account the Israeli regime for limiting access and delaying humanitarian missions in the Gaza Strip. The health agency called for clearer security warranties as well as a functional conflict resolution mechanism and predictable and accelerated movement through checkpoints to ensure humanitarian access to the Gazan population and to support the restoration of the health system. The health agency denounced the obstacles they constantly face in carrying out their work to bring relief to those affected by the Israeli continuous military aggressions. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. The delegation of the Colombian government in talks with the National Liberation Army (ELN) confirmed on Sunday the beginning of an extraordinary round of dialogues in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. The initiative was proposed by the guerrilla group, considering that the peace process is going through a critical stage. The meeting began on Saturday and will last until April 22nd. They also confirmed that on Friday the parties held meetings with the representatives of the warrantor and accompanying countries. The ceasefire and territorial transformations will be some of the issues to be addressed in this round, to which the Colombian president made reference. The government of President Gustavo Petro is promoting a policy of total peace through the establishment of dialogue tables with various illegal armed groups.
Now we have conversations with the ELN, with problems because that is not easy. And as president, I have to say it, I want to guarantee that this negotiation table with the ELN is preserved, and that it advances to a negotiation or the definitive decision to stop the violence with all the requirements that this implies.
The Attorney General's office opened an investigation on Sunday to locate the culprit in the murder of social leader Jaime Vázquez, a crime committed in northeastern Colombia. The incident occurred at 9 a.m. local time in Cúcuta in the La Riviera neighborhood in the north of Santander when men on a motorcycle shot at Vasquez. Meanwhile, the department's governor's office offered a reward of 50 million pesos, equivalent to $13,000, for anyone who helps solve this crime and cooperates in locating the attackers. According to the balance of the Institute for Studies for Development and Peace, so far in 2024, at least 43 social leaders have been murdered in the country. And in Ecuador, authorities issued on Sunday a regulation to apply voluntarily euthanasia to people with serious and incurable illness or injuries. The Ministry of Public Health indicated that in order to request the application of voluntary active euthanasia, a medical report signed by the treating doctors of the National Health System will be necessary. A definitive diagnosis of the illness or bodily injury suffered by the patient will also be a requirement. In the case of a voluntary active euthanasia, notarized advance directives or living wills and a copy of the judicial decision supporting the legal representation are required. Euthanasia is a procedure that consists of the administration of drugs in lethal doses with the objective of causing the anticipated death of the applicant. Pope Francis has expressed his support to the farmers of the community of San Juan Bautista de Catacaos in the north of Peru. In a message broadcast by the Archbishop of Lima, the pontiff called on farmers to defend their land and prevent dispossession. Part of his communication was directed to the blessing he gave in honor of them, to whom he asked to continue their struggle. This support is Francis' response to the denunciations presented by the farmers last year at the Vatican. There, they explained that the companies associated with the group Sodalitium Christiane Vitae had tried to evict them from their land.
The members of the farmer community of Piura, I know what happened to you. Defend the land, don't let it be stolen. Thank you for what you are doing. I pray for you from here and I am close to you and I gladly give you my blessing. God bless the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And please do not forget to pray for me. Courage and go ahead.
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, and to mark the 45th anniversary of the beginning of the diplomatic relations between Cuba and Grenada, Grenada's Prime Minister offered an interview to our multi-platform teleSUR. Today at 7:30 p.m. Caracas time, you can assist it. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In the United States, the criminal trial against former President Donald Trump began Monday in New York in the middle of the election campaign in which the Republican aspires to return to the White House. New York prosecutors in this trial have charged with 34 counts related to falsifying financial reports to cover up hush payments from a porn star in 2016 and two others. These are considered serious crimes because they were part of a scheme to conceal information damaging the candidate from voters. The charges carry a penalty of up to 4 years in prison. However, it seems that if he is convicted, he will not be sentenced to prison. Trump is managing to turn the trial into a political show for the benefit of his campaign. And if he wins, as some polls indicate, he could be the first convicted felon to lead the White House. Mixed protests were heard outside a New York courthouse on Monday. Protesters chanted, "No one is above the law," and supporters shouted, "USA, USA, USA." This is the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president and the first of 4 indictments against Trump. The former president has managed to delay the other 3 criminal trials pending against him with all sorts of legal maneuvers. This is considered the least damaging to his candidacy, although it is the only one that is being processed before the elections. Dozens of people are expected to be summoned to the courtroom to begin the process of finding 12 jurors in addition to 6 alternates. In Niger, citizens rallied demanding that the governing board immediately expel U.S. troops from the territory. As happened with the French troops after the Nigerian government put an end to the agreement that allowed the presence of Washington's armed forces, the citizens demanded their immediate withdrawal. Protesters further reaffirmed that the era of empires and colonies was over. Niamey had signed an agreement allowing the presence of 1,000 Pentagon soldiers, which was dissolved by the governing board that has opted for a military exchange with Russia. Niger continues to expel any Western remnants and reaches $1 million oil deal with China. 3 agreements were signed in Niamey, the country's capital, by the Nigerian Prime Minister Ali Lamine Seyne and the general manager of the Chinese state oil company CNPC, So Kyum. They are included in an advance of $400 million paid by the Chinese company at an interest rate of 7%. The agreement provides for a memorandum of understanding and a joint crude oil marketing contract. The Nigerian premier welcomed his country's cooperation with Beijing and criticized previous governments for mortgaging the country to enemy powers. On Monday, the war in Sudan reaches its first year. The conflict between the army and paramilitary forces has left over 15,000 deaths and 25 million people dependent on humanitarian aid. After several months of tensions between the Rapid Support Forces and the army for the vacant power after the coup of 2019, heavy fighting broke out, and today there are 10 million displaced people. Humanitarian organizations have also denounced massacres committed in Darfur, more than 19 million children without schools, and an increase in the number and violence of sexual crimes, including those committed against children. Despite international efforts, peace in that North African nation does not look like a possibility in the short term. The United Nations stated that Sudan is facing the world's worst humanitarian crisis after a year of armed conflict between the Rapid Support Forces and the army. According to the latest United Nations report, the conflict has left almost 15,000 people dead, at least 8 million civilians displaced, and 25 million Sudanese in urgent need of humanitarian aid. Humanitarian workers denounced the blocking of international aid, rising levels of famine, and human rights violations. According to the World Food Programme, the states most vulnerable and affected by the crisis are West Kordofan, South Kordofan, Blue Nile, and it's spreading to other areas in the African region. In this context, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls for support to the Sudanese in their efforts to emerge from the conflict and to urgently increase humanitarian aid. Also, through the International Humanitarian Conference for Sudan and its neighbors, the United Nations representative described the situation faced by the Sudanese as a nightmare following the bloodshed, sexual violence, and destruction of their infrastructures. Guterres called for more support for donor contributions, the protection of civilians, and guarantees for full humanitarian access in the African country. And in Germany, for the first time since 2012, the Bundesliga has a new champion, Bayer Leverkusen. Their 25th league win of the season on Sunday confirmed a title they have secured in unbeaten, record-breaking and surprising fashion. Bayer Leverkusen have broken Bayern Munich's stranglehold on the Bundesliga title after a 5-0 win over Werder Bremen confirmed Xabi Alonso's side as champions with 5 games to spare. Fans rushed from the stands to the pitch to celebrate the moment. Leverkusen were not among the favorites for the title at the beginning of the season, with Bayern expected to wrap up a 12th consecutive title, and Borussia Dortmund, piped to the post last year, anticipated to be their closest challengers. But Spanish coach Alonso has led his team to the verge revanche of the first invincible season in Bundesliga history, with the German Cup final to come and Leverkusen still in the Europa League. And in this context, Bayer Leverkusen not only won the championship on Sunday, but could also win other titles and even set a new winning record. Bayer Leverkusen has become Bundesliga's champion for the first time in its history. The team is undefeated in 29 matches, 25 wins, an absolute record in the tournament. Bayer Leverkusen is still alive in all competition, maintains aspirations in the German Cup and the Europa League. The reigning German champions added another achievement to this historic title. They matched Juventus' 43-match unbeaten streak, and if Leverkusen were to win their Europa League quarter-final match against West Ham, they would set a new record with 44 consecutive matches without defeat. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. To close our news brief, we'll leave you with celebrations images as Leverkusen fans enjoyed their team historical title. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.